listening to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I am here with Matias Marquez, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ethos NFT. Thanks for being with me.
Thrilled to be here.
Are you?
I am. I'm actually really happy. I'm more excited even as we talk. We've been talking before that we started recording here. So
yeah. We had almost recorded a couple times. One time you were sick, and the second time I can't remember what happened. So we finally made it. I've interviewed a couple people from Ethos. And so you're kind of the third, but you're the most important guy on the list. So it's good to finally have you here. So how did you get into crypto or Web3 or NFTs or whatever we call this nonsense we're talking about here?
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't say I'm the most important by far, but I am excited to be here and happy to share the story with you and talk to you about all the things we like talking about. So how did I get into Web3? So I have a background of helping consumer brands adopt new technology. And in my previous company, we did that, I think, quite successfully. And I just fallen in love with blockchain and what the applications of blockchain could be. And I realized that this is the technology that consumer brands are going to need to adopt eventually, because it provides unique benefits that otherwise were impossible. It provides another layer of engagement with customers and these types of things. We are admittedly very early. And I think it's probably similar to when like the internet first came out. Brands didn't realize initially they needed a website. Eventually that proved to be true that they needed a website. You could probably say the same thing for social media. When social media first came out, brands were thinking, why would I need this? And now obviously they need it. I think that's the exact same thing that's going to play out here with Web3 and NFTs and digital assets.
Is there any value at this point in getting involved because it's so early? Like, is there a first mover advantage at this point? Or is it just kind of like, well, the technology it's like if you got into Friendster or MySpace or something, and then what was the point? Because it all became Facebook anyways. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, it's a good question. But I will say this, that I think specifically brands too, I think they're seeing it kind of in real time now with TikTok. I think if you had asked a brand a year ago, is it like worth getting in this early? I think a lot of brands might have said, I don't know, we're thinking about it. And now everyone's like running there, and a lot of the people who were there first did benefit a lot.
But sorry, how do you tie that to TikTok?
I think if you look at traditional brands and their engagement with social media platforms, I think they were hesitant and reluctant a year ago to participate with TikTok, and for whatever reason. And now they're realizing, oh, shoot, we should have been there. We need to be there now. And the ones that were more leaning into the future and being more innovative and participating earlier have been rewarded, and they have had more engagement and lower cost of customer acquisition and all these great things they've benefited from being early. So I think if you're a brand thinking of joining and participating now, sure, there's risks. But like participating with TikTok a year ago or 2 years ago, there's a disproportionate amount of eyeballs and buzz you're going to get.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I feel like it does. I feel like I railroaded your introduction though.
Yeah. So like obviously really passionate about helping consumer brands adopt new technologies that we think will create better relationships with their customers and provide them, more benefits. And how I got into Web3 was I realized that this is what blockchain can do for brands. And when I looked at how we could help, I knew that with my experience of helping consumer brands adopt new technologies, like it wasn't going to be the Bitcoin maxis or the Ethereum maxis and people who were speculating on currencies and other things that were going to go authentically to brands to say, here's how you can benefit from this technology. And it sounds a bit cheesy, but it felt like kind of like a calling, like, hey, somebody has to help these consumer brands understand this stuff. Somebody has to come in there with like pure intentions. And I felt like, I was in a position to do it, and I felt like I needed to do it, especially, and this is going to sound a bit crazy, but like, maybe not crazy, but like I have a kid now, and like, it's like, what do I want to be spending my time on? And I felt like this is a really important cause because, you see it with when bad actors are participating in a space, it's not a great outcome. And I feel like if we have really great intentions and we're helping onboard a really important part of what will be this ecosystem, I think it'll be something that I'll be really proud to talk to my kid about.
So what is it about the kind of crypto value system or the tenets of crypto that you think are so important that you'd want to pass it on to your kid? Are you talking about like decentralization or, pseudo-anonymity? That is a hard word. We need to change that one. Like, what is it about this? Is it the provenance? Like, what is it that excites you that you're like, this holds value for society in the future?
Yeah, like, I think the technologies that have changed our lives the most they often start off very simple, right? And I think that's like a key part of it. I think what gets me really excited about blockchain is that it's like the simplest thing, and I think the most important part of it is that it's transparent.
Right.
So like it's available for people to see, and anybody can look it up.
Yeah.
Right. So right away, just from that one benefit, you can create more equitable relationships. Right. It's less likely somebody can kind of pull the rug on you if you can see what's happening publicly. So the fact that the blockchain is transparent and you can't monkey with it provides an opportunity for digital items to be recorded, owned, held, transferred, and then you can see, the history and provenance of these things. So it's a bit kind of like you can get technical and get like, into the weeds really quickly. But I think if a ledger exists that anybody can access without anybody interfering with it, we can create better relationships between lots of entities, but specifically in our case, we think there's a really great relationship that we can forge and develop for brands and their customers.
Right. Okay, that's great. I think that's really helpful. So you ran a gift card company.
I did.
Tell us about that and how that, because you kind of said you had, a tech company or whatever, but how did that get you into NFTs or draw you in?
Yeah. So like, a long time ago now, but I was a student at university. I had an idea around helping consumer brands adopt digital gift cards. And the idea was like brands like selling gift cards, and they weren't really selling them on their website. They weren't really, they were just selling them in their physical stores and maybe through like third-party marketplaces like Loblaws or Shoppers or things like that. And for me, it was like, hey, people are going to their websites. They're going there for a bunch of reasons, to learn about the brand, to maybe buy their products or whatever, but like you're not selling your gift cards there. So we had developed, so from that kind of idea of, hey, consumer brands need to be offering their customers gift cards online and digitally, we built a platform that would help brands do exactly that. So we created this technology to help brands issue and sell gift cards online digitally. And we ended up getting big brands to adopt our technology and use it. Brands the size of like Walmart and Whole Foods and that type of size of brands. So through that journey, which ended up being a really successful outcome. And
did you sell it?
We did, yeah. So we sold it to the large leading provider in that space. It was like a really great story. But at the end, I realized like what did I learn from this? And I had learned that I could help consumer brands adopt new technology, because that's actually a really tough thing to do, because you have to go in it with one, really good intentions, and two, with a really long-term focus.
Yeah.
So that history of helping consumer brands adopt digital gift cards really leaned into, like, for me, it was like, hey, I think I'm really well positioned here to help brands adopt this new thing, which is digital assets. I think that's why I'm so keen on helping here, because I think I can.
So when we look at an NFT, when you are like summer parties or Christmas parties and people are like, so what is an NFT? Like, what is this nonsense? You know what I mean? How do you explain that to the common man?
So I'll tell you a funny story. So my wife's family is from Campbell River, and I'm like really close to their dad. And her dad's like a mechanic, right? And like, right? And like, I had explained to him like the gift card company, right? Like digital gift cards. And then recently he was like, so tell me about this new thing. And I go, Mark, not even going to try it. Yeah. But jokes aside, it is early and it is complex. And I think it's probably similar to trying to explain the internet back when the internet was like not adopted yet, right? And it was in its early stage. What do I tell people at dinner parties or whatever when we're talking about what are digital assets, what are NFTs? And I think the easiest way to actually describe it is this, because I think people follow me on this, like, will we spend more time in the future in digital environments than we spend today? I think a lot of people go, I can get there. Yeah, I think we'll spend more time in digital environments. I think our kids will spend more time in digital environments. So that's like one thing I think a lot of people will like leap with you on. Another thing I think people will leap with you on is, will those digital environments become more immersive? I think it's like not a hard jump to make there.
Yeah.
So if you jump to a future where we're spending more time in digital environments, those digital environments are more immersive. I think it's not a crazy leap to make at that point that we will really want to own digital things, because where we humans spend our time, we like to have some sovereignty. We like to have ownership of things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy right now that we like spend time in digital worlds, even if we're on Instagram, even if we're on like Zoom or whatever, and we spend time in physical worlds. In the physical worlds, we own things. In the digital worlds, we don't own things.
Yeah.
So what NFTs and digital assets, and I say NFTs and digital assets because we like to call them digital assets, what they are is ownership in those digital worlds, right? So you can own digital things for the first time. And I know that initially sounds kind of crazy, but I'm telling you, it's not. When we spend a lot of our time in digital worlds, we are going to want to truly own things in those digital worlds, and those, I think digital assets are a key thing that's going to be a part of our future.
Well, I think when you even think about the term NFT to digital asset, I mean, Nike came out with, is it dot swoosh? Was that the thing that they
did
launched?
it through Artifact, yeah, which they had bought.
Yeah, so and there wasn't any language when they launched that about NFTs or blockchain or anything like that, right? It was fully just kind of consumer based information that most people can understand. They've removed that from it, and is that important for people to get on board and into Web3?
Absolutely, like that's very intentional on their part. I think we are we try to use the word digital assets because I think NFTs are like it's kind of like too much of a technical term for something.
Yeah.
Something that I truly believe, and I say all the time, is when we get to a point where the average consumer is interacting with an NFT or a digital asset, and they're unaware that they are, is when we'll have when we've gotten to a really important place in this whole thing. And I think that's what Nike's trying to do. That's what we're trying to do, where we're trying to make this so simple and easy to use that you don't understand. It's kind of like, when you're using your computer, it's like, do you really need to know like how the ones and zeros are working? Right? There's ones and zeros happening, but you don't need to know.
Yeah. I certainly don't think about it. That's for
right?
sure.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about some examples, and maybe I just kind of led into this with Nike, but examples of consumer brands using digital assets in a meaningful way, where there's like some adoption and some success, and people are into it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good examples, right? And it's early though, right? So I would say a lot of the examples, especially like earlier this year, I think that like rightfully so, like, hey, let's test out, let's see what it's going to look like. It's very experimental. So I would say the first kind of cohort of examples have been kind of experimental with brands that like to lead to do something that kind of like sparks a reaction from their audience. I think Nike's been good at that. Adidas has done did a cool thing. The Gap did a cool program where half of the proceeds went to a charity, but the participants helped design a new sweater. The NFT was the sweater, and then the NFT also got you access to the sweater. I think those are really great examples. I would categorize all those examples, however, as like a brand experimenting. And that is, I think, in hindsight, really like a really smart way to look at this. Like, you have this new technology. There's lots of really like laid out use cases on how in the future this will be really important. So what an appropriate reaction, I think, would be like, hey, let's take the temperature from our customers. So let's experiment with something. So a lot of the examples I would categorize into that bucket. What's interesting is, as the space is developing, we're starting to move away a little bit from experimental use cases, and we're starting to move to more like really pointed and really practical examples. And I think Starbucks is a good example. Also Nike too, but Starbucks' program, where it's an enhancement and it's an additional layer of their loyalty program, I think that's really interesting. It's very pointed. It's very clear that, hey, our loyalty program will continue to operate the way it's operating, but hey, now, as an additional feature to our loyalty program, we're going to have these digital assets that gain you extra, like, benefits in certain ways. And it's kind of gamify it, but also gives you access to special things. And what I think that ultimately creates is like another view into each of the customers, right? So if you look at a large loyalty program, the challenge with most loyalty programs today is they kind of like just broadly bucket customers in certain ways. And what NFTs do and digital assets do is now you're giving unique tokens to unique individuals for unique reasons. And then it kind of gives you this like better picture of the customer, so you can then react individually to those customers. This is just the next layer of customer loyalty. And Starbucks is a good example of them.
But why do they need to do that? Why can't they just be like, oh, hey, we're gonna categorize you in these different areas, and we're going to give you access to different stuff based on these things? Like, what does any of that have to do with blockchain or NFTs? Like, why should that? It seems like just makes things more complex?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's an answer I would give today, and I think there's an answer I'd give in the future. But today I would say this, like, if you work at one of these large consumer brands, what are the conversations that are happening? A lot of them have to be around, like, how do we get the next customer? How do we acquire the next customer at a low cost? How do we talk to our target customer that may right now be Gen Z or millennial? And that's part of the reason why we're talking about TikTok, right? I think a lot of these companies, their reaction to those questions are, let's go to them through TikTok. So if you're one of these consumer brands and you're thinking, how do I get to my next customer at a lower customer cost? How do I attract a customer that's maybe younger, maybe a Gen Z? Like, they like this technology, right? So you can agree with, like, and I use TikTok a lot as an example, you can agree with why they like TikTok or not, but they're starting to get that they need to be there.
Right.
You can agree whether digital assets make sense for you, or you can agree or not, but the customer you want to acquire is into this stuff. And what's really interesting, and part of the answer of today is, if you move now, you're going to be able to get in front of them at a lower cost because others aren't.
Right.
So in brand talk, this is like CAC, right? This is low cost of customer acquisition. If you could do something, and we were talking about your son and his lemonade stand, by your son offering a new payment type, he was able to acquire all these extra people. Jared's son put a sign saying you could buy his lemonade with Bitcoin, and it got tons of impressions and tons of views. Why? Because others aren't doing that. And there's a lot of people that are interested in this stuff. So just to kind of boil it down though, if you're a brand today looking to attract new customers, be innovative, and also get into a customer base that maybe you're trying to, maybe it's a very competitive way to do that, digital assets are great because it's a new way to interact with them. And then the more of a long-term answer is around, well, providing transparency, providing authenticity, allowing them to see these transactions on the blockchain. All this more technical stuff also supports the thesis that there are things you'll be able to provide your customers that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do without blockchain.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to give you a big answer there.
No, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I appreciate, because I think it's an important thing to consider. Like, is this just a gimmick? Is this just a marketing play? Or is there actually value in the technology of itself? Because, and it's not that there's value in a marketing play. There's value in attracting customers in a unique, creative, interesting way. But hopefully there's also value in the technology that goes beyond that. Because once then everybody does it, then
the marketing piece goes away. And that's why there's two categories I look at this in. Is like, why do it today? And why do it at all, and why do it in the future, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of good reasons on why do it today, because there is marketing value, but that isn't the reason to do this. The reason to do it is because there are benefits that the blockchain unlocks for your customers that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of examples that we can kind of dig into, but I'll just give you a couple, right? So imagine your wife buys an NFT for a brand that gives her special access and extra benefits and extra perks. You could do that with a physical, traditional loyalty program. You could do that. What would the blockchain enable that otherwise wouldn't be able to do? Well, one thing they could do is it could give your wife pure proof and like the ability to show that I am actually one of those members. That sounds like it's not that important, but imagine like a very prestigious loyalty club that you're a part of. You'd like to be able to prove that you are a part of that. And that transparency of the blockchain would allow your wife to actually prove and say, I am actually one of those members. That's a small example. Another example would be, let's say your wife's a part of that loyalty group and they get special access and special benefits. And let's say that she follows this brand for a long time, for 20 years, okay? And in a traditional environment, when she's through that loyalty program, what's the off-ramp look like, right? So the off-ramp would be kind of done, and like I was there for the 20 years and now I'm kind of like doing something else, right? If it was a digital asset and she could then trade it and pass it down to your son or your daughter, the off-ramp's way better for her, right? Because now she's either sold it and got some kind of monetary benefit from that patronage and that loyalty, or she's like, given it to somebody who's going to see value in it. And if you ask the individual, in this case, the example would be your wife, she'd be a lot happier at the end of that journey, being able to kind of monetize or just benefit from the off-ramp. Yeah. Because right now, like I use Air Canada as an example. Like I'm an Air Canada, like in their loyalty program and fly a lot with them. which has been great. But by the time I'm done, it's like it's over, right? And it's not a beautiful kind of off ramp. So there's a lot of examples. We could talk more about them, but these are the things that you can kind of provide. And it's like it really all comes down to enhanced loyalty and more benefits to the customer. And I think that's the direction we're going, where we're valuing customers more and more and giving them better experiences and experiences that make them happy. And blockchain is an example of something that can help do that.
I think another interesting perspective that I've heard is like, what about renting out your NFT, right? Like maybe you subscribe to Microsoft Office, but you don't need it every day, and you rent it out for 1 day a week to somebody, or maybe you are part of kind of an exclusive club, and you can't go to their next event, and so you could maybe monetize that and rent that out to somebody. Is that reasonable to see?
Yeah. So two other reasons, and like in the category of like what can blockchain do that traditional non-blockchain programs can't do, right? If you had like back to your wife's example, if she had that elite loyalty status, imagine if she could rent it for the week, like if she was going to go away for the weekend and there was like an event happening, and she could say, hey, I'll give it to my friend for the weekend and lend it to her for 2 days. Again, like from the perspective of the user, your wife in this case, she'd love it. She'd be like, hey, I'm so happy to be a part of this loyalty program because the off ramp's going to be great, right? During my patronage, I'm going to get all these special rewards and perks. When I'm like not using it, I can lend it to somebody else, right? Another really good example and another good reason on why blockchain would be this, cross promotions and cross access. So let's say your wife's a part of this elite program. In the traditional non-blockchain world, who knows this? She does. The brand knows it. Yeah. But nobody else knows it. Yeah. So we're at this nice, hotel here, and if you're a member, like you don't think this hotel would want to give her a special rate, knowing she's a part of that group, right? Right. So like we can use the airline example again, but like if more people got to have access to who were the elite members in a loyalty program, you could provide cross membership. Like Cactus Club could say, hey, for the people that are members here and here, Thursdays half off drinks for you. Why would they do that? Because they know that the profile of this customer and this customer fits their customer perfect. Yeah. Right. And you can't do those cross promotions because in a non-blockchain open environment, only like Cactus ain't going to know who's a part of this loyalty program. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay. I think that's fascinating. And that's also really helpful to understand, like, what are the use cases? Yeah. Is fundamentally what we're talking about here. Okay. So the metaverse is a big thing we hear about, and I'm not sure if it exists. I don't even know what it is. I don't think anybody really knows what it is yet. And maybe there's different levels of what the metaverse will be like. But it seems like a lot of some of the major brands that are engaging with conversations around the metaverse aren't engaging in conversations around blockchain. It's just like a video game we live in or something. I'm not really sure. So how important is the blockchain aspect of this conversation?
I think it's super important, right? So here's something that should freak people out.
I like this.
Yeah. Like when you look at the definition of the metaverse that Microsoft has posted on their website, Facebook and Meta has posted on their website, you look at these big companies and they're like building the metaverse is what they're trying to do, right? If you look at their definition, none of them include blockchain in their definition. And that's a huge problem because we are all willing to agree that we'll spend more time in digital environments in the future. And if we're spending more time in digital environments in the future and the underlying pin and the underlying like technology doesn't include blockchain, we have a really big problem, right? Why? Well, if we end up like having to go into Meta's metaverse and there's no blockchain, then they're going to control everything. Right. And they're going to be able to keep you stuck in there and also remove you. Right. So if I was talking to a friend and he said that like his daughter lost her Roblox account and she was freaking out. Right. No, but seriously. Right.
Yeah, and I bet she was.
Exactly. Right. And here's the thing that's really unfair right now is you go into these environments and you buy things, but then you don't get to take them with you elsewhere in digital worlds. And that's the big thing that the blockchain provides. So if we issue digital assets and we register them on the blockchain is this public ledger that nobody owns, right? And they're registered there. Well, now games and metaverses can actually pull them in. But what that enables is you to leave this one, go to this one, and still have your items.
Right.
And that's the reason why these big companies don't have it listed. But that's also the reason why we are like fighting like heck here, because we want the future that will have more digital environments to include the blockchain. Because if it don't include the blockchain, then we're going to end up in a world where you're going to spend all this money buying things, and those things won't be transferable, and therefore you'll lose them.
Right.
It's crazy. Like, imagine the clothing we had on right now, we only got to wear it in this room. It's like when we leave, it's gone, right?
That's an interesting perspective, right? I guess that's the scary thing is like, well, you know, you put all this work into building something in a game, or, you know, and you earn all these points or assets, and then, yeah, as you age out, you know, that game isn't cool for kids your age anymore, or whatever. You just walk away. In the same way you walk away from a loyalty program. I guess it's the same concept, really.
It's the same thing. And like, I think we're getting better optimizing for like the benefit of people. And if you believe that, if you think the world's going to get more efficient and we're going to optimize for the benefit of individuals, then you're going to get quickly to the point that, okay, as we own things, we're going to truly own them, and we'll be able to transfer them and take them with us. And I have not heard a better way of doing that than the blockchain. Right. There's no you know, other leading idea that's like, oh, do it this way and you'll be able to own them your own and be able to transfer them.
Right.
What makes the blockchain so special is that nobody owns it. It's completely available to everybody. Therefore, if you register digital assets and digital products on them, they're then therefore automatically transferable anywhere.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So we're here in Vancouver. We're broadcasting right now from Paradox Hotel. Vancouver seems to be some type of Web3 hub or something. It's certainly emerging as why is that important to Vancouver? And what does Vancouver as a city have to offer to this technology?
Yeah, lots to talk to you about here. I'm really optimistic about Vancouver and what this can mean for the city. I'm also really worried that we kind of like mess it up. Yeah, for sure. Like here's what's happening. Really cool Web3 companies and technologies have been created in Vancouver. Like, this is a fact. Dapper Labs is from here. Even like if you zoom out to Canada, Ethereum was created in, in Ontario. Like, Canada's kind of kicking butt right now on like the inception of all this.
CZ from Binance grew up here.
Right? There you go.
I mean, it just never ends.
Yeah. So, you know, we can talk about like why has Canada or Vancouver kind of like incubated and created a lot of this. And I had Lucy on our fireside chat series, and she had an interesting perspective, and she said, I think it's the mountains. I think it's the fact that people aren't kind of like so day to day in their job, and they have time to like think about new things. And that's why Vancouver and BC and the nature might actually be contributing to like, you know, great ideas. So we can talk about like, why are these things being kind of like sprouted here? The other thing we can talk about is like, well, if it is sprouting here, is it just going to go to the US, right? Because imagine if, you know, the Silicon Valley started here and then it blew up in California. I worry that that's what's going to happen, right? Because Canada is good at like, obviously like creating an environment for lots of innovation, but it's also good at like pushing that innovation away sometimes. So I'm talking about two different things, but like one, we can talk a lot about why Vancouver and BC and Canada is creating an environment for new ideas. And one of those new ideas has been Web3, and Web3 is kind of a global thing now, and a lot of it's coming from Vancouver and Canada. The other thing we could talk about is like, are we at risk of not kind of benefiting from that? And is that just going to go down in the US?
So why do you think things have happened here? Like, I had Deet Shirley on the podcast. He invented the term NFT, and he wrote ERC 721, which is where most NFTs are hosted, right? And he's brilliant and very intelligent and a visionary, right? Who created a lot of what we're talking about today. So why did that happen here? What is it about this place that's special for all of and there's so many examples of this. We're only talking about just a couple, but there's so many examples of this. Why does that happen here?
I think like I'm a big, like, I love Canada, and I think Canada is just like such a great country for so many different reasons. But I think one of the things that I think being in Canada and having a lot of diversity and an environment that feels safe. It's like, I think that's all like creates an environment for ideas, right? Yeah. And I also think like us being in now specifically in BC and being north of California, I think we're kind of geared into like thinking about tech and like innovating in technology. And I think we've had enough now of stories like Hootsuite and even like Shopify and these types of things, that it's kind of mobilized an army of innovators around like creating ideas. So here's what I think. I think there's a perfect thing happening here where there's enough history of people being successful at this that has motivated people to believe that they could do it too.
Right.
I think we're in an environment where the infrastructure is quite strong and the government's stable and all these things. And I also think this might be a bit of a counter thing, or a bit of a surprise to you, is I also think the rain helps, right? I know. So hear me out on this. So the summer comes, we're all like in nature, we're all hiking, we're all doing stuff, right? And we're probably like in that time very similar to like a lot of like my parents from South America, a lot of South American countries where like we're out at the beach, we're out doing stuff outside. Not a ton of innovating, right? But lots of ideas, right? And then the fall comes and it's like raining every day. So now we're in this unique position to be like, all those ideas we thought about,
we can now do.
We might as well do them because like we can't go anywhere.
I feel like your perspective on Vancouver weather is a little pessimistic.
Yeah, but you get what I mean. I feel like we're in a perfect environment where like the environment's safe and secure. There's lots of opportunity for innovation. Then we have like nature like gives us this really great perspective on life. Yeah. And then we have to end up hibernating for like a long period of time, and we just work.
I think it's also interesting. We have a new mayor in Vancouver, and he's pro crypto, which I think is going to be really helpful for the city as well. So how do we screw it up?
You know, it's something that I'm actually really worried about, because I think that, you know, there's different permutations from here, and there's a permutation where we like really rise up to it, and we have this like robust ecosystem of so many like cool companies, and we have like the next big tech companies out of Vancouver. So that's the permutation that obviously I want to see kind of put forward. I think there's a balance of regulations that will, if it skews too much one way or too much the other way, it's going to not have that kind of come to life. I used to think if we regulate, we're going to push everything down to the US. And then I've actually come to see that some regulation actually promotes innovation because it gives people a clear pathway of like, oh, I understand what the rules are and I understand how to do it. So I think it's the whole like Goldilocks thing. I think if we get the right degree of regulation, we will be in an environment where lots of companies will flourish here and kind of build off the traction that's already happened, because we have Dapper and we have all these other companies here. I do think that's a hard thing to get right. I think that if we overregulate, people are going to just go to other places where there's less regulation, and if we underregulate, I think it's going to cause us to go slower because people are just unsure of kind of the landscape.
It's because business doesn't like the unknown, right? And so if people don't know, like if businesses are thinking, well, if I create an NFT project and it becomes a security, now I'm going to prison because I was flocking a security illegally or something. And obviously that's a scary situation to be in. And if that's what people are thinking, then they're certainly going to shy away from doing that. And so, yeah, there is some type of kind of equalizing factor where people can have a pathway forward. That's super important.
Yeah, it's a tough balance that the regulators and the government and everyone's going to have to try to strike, but
I'm sure they won't strike it well.
Yeah, exactly, right. But man, it's worth really trying to get it right, because we are right now in a position where Vancouver could be like the next big hub for technology success stories and job creation and all these things. I'd hate to see us not fulfill our potential that way.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Let's see to it. Okay, let's wrap things up here with just one other question. Why should schools be teaching this stuff or talking about this? And I guess we could talk about high schools, universities, whatever. Why is this important to the students of these schools?
I mean, I don't know how many cycles we have to go through where the things we teach at schools are lagging behind the things that, right? It's like, how many times do we have to do this? Yeah. Like, now we're teaching coding. Yes. Right. It's like, finally, but what's going to happen now is like, by the time these kids are done, you're going to be able to using like AI and open AI to write the code for you. Right. I think that it's pretty clear that AI is going to play a big role in the future. I think it's pretty clear that blockchain and Web3 technologies will play a big role in the future. So I think schools have to I think that, and I don't blame them because it's obviously a hard thing to do to create curriculums and all this stuff. But I do think the world moves way faster now, and I do think that if you're seeing these things come to life, or they're obviously in the future, we got to start teaching the kids now.
Yeah.
But you would know more about this. Like I'm curious to what your perspective is. Like, do you think do you think AI and blockchain are going to be that important in the future? And if they are the schools adapting fast enough?
Well, I think that, yes, it's super important, absolutely. But no, the schools aren't. And there is I think the way that schools are designed is not in a way to encourage this type of education. And so I think what's important is that at this point, there isn't really a pathway forward for schools to start teaching this kind of stuff in any meaningful way fast enough. So students have to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
They gotta. So that's why people learn about crypto on YouTube, because it's like the only place they can learn stuff, right? And that's why I'm creating courses that people can take so that they can learn this kind of stuff, hopefully from like a reasonably trustworthy source, not just some YouTuber who's shilling tokens, right? Which is kind of the standard way to learn this stuff at this point. And so I think the challenge is, it's like there's always a fear. When I started teaching social media marketing 10 years ago, it was like risky, right? But it was clear it was here.
Right? And that's my point, is like, that's when they should have been big into it. It doesn't take like a really intelligent person to like spend some time to realize, okay, obviously these two technologies are going to play a big role.
Yeah.
So therefore, let's start teaching them now. What I think will happen is like the same cycle that always happens, is like, it'll take too long, and by the time they start teaching it, others will have reacted way faster.
Yeah. So I think another part of this is, it's hard to teach new things because it's a lot of work, because it changes so quickly. So it's hard for teachers or professors to teach this kind of stuff. It's also it's hard to find people who are educated and also who know the technology to be able to teach it. Like, they know how to teach and they know the technology.
Yeah.
So, there's some limitations here. But what I saw, 10 years ago, is when students took a social media class, they could learn a bit about social media, a small amount, and they would go into industry with a degree in whatever, one social media course, and get a job as a social media manager, because they knew way more than anybody.
Yeah.
But they knew a tiny bit. That competitive advantage is long gone. Everybody knows about social media now, and it's easy to learn. But that same competitive advantage is what I see in Web3 right now. You know a little bit about Web3. Like, you understand decentralization to its smallest degree. Yeah. You can now go to a Web3 company and be like, I'm a HR manager, or I am an accountant. I want to work for you, or whatever. I'm a marketer. Like, and just having a little bit of understanding is more than almost anybody, and it's a huge competitive advantage from an employment perspective.
Yeah, like I feel like schools should do kind of like what Google was doing with like those like flex days or whatever. It's like, we should we'll teach our kids 4 out of the 5 days they're in school, like pure curriculum.
Yeah.
But that 5th day, we should be able to throw just like them in like AI for a few months, blockchain for a few months. Like we wouldn't be really pulling them away from anything. And yeah, because they don't need to come out with like a full degree in this stuff.
Right.
If they come out with just a little bit and enough knowledge to, one, get themselves curious to where they'll go and learn themselves. Yeah. And 2, it gives them such a leg up when they go for employment, because now it's like, hey, I'm not an expert, but I know a lot more than you do, so they'll get hired.
I think you and I may have just decided we're starting our own school.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's like 4 days a week. We're gonna just shoot it down the middle and teach your kids.
You're gonna learn algebra,
and then that 5th day, don't even ask.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. I think this is a really super helpful and interesting conversation. I appreciate the time that you've taken to be with us. It's great to learn a little bit more about how NFTs can play a real role into onboarding more people into Web3. So, Matias, appreciate your time. Thanks for being with me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jared.